Welcome, ladies. I can see you all filtering in now, and it's absolutely gorgeous that you've taken the time to join us. We'll just take a minute to have a look at you all popping in, and make sure, before we start speaking, I'm going to just allow a little bit of time as we, as you all click through, join us, and well, so first of all, welcome to the Women Future Conference 2022. Woohoo! We're excited to have you here, and we all volunteer to share our expertise here in the hopes that we inspire you to make a difference and share your voice so that the landscape changes for women and other minority groups. So we're all really excited to be here. I'm going to be your host or moderator today. My name's Marnie LeFevre, and we're just going to take a few minutes now to ensure everyone joins us. But before we begin, I want to ask you all a couple of questions so you get used to using the chat and we get a bit of a feel for who's in the room. So first of all, if you could pop in the chat where you're joining us from, that'd be really, really great. I'm joining you from Perth, Australia. So it's midnight here. And our other panelists, who I'll introduce you to soon, are from Washington and Charlotte in the USA, and the south of France, which Bri's Australian, but she actually lives in France. So let us know where you're joining us from. Let me just check chat. So Virginia, Toronto, Canada. Hi, Jane. Hi, Juliet. Hi, Jennifer from Los Angeles. Kim from Indiana. Lauren from San Francisco. I used to live in San Francisco. I had my baby girl there. Toronto, Canada. Suzanne, welcome. Lavanya in India. Beautiful. Welcome, Lavanya. Philadelphia. That's where my husband's from. It's Philly. So Bucharest, Romania. Nice one, Elena, and welcome. So it's great to see all of you flooding through here. Now, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being the least, 10 being the most, how much experience have you had as a speaker? So maybe you're just starting out and looking for some tips, or you've spoken a few times and want to learn more, or maybe you're experienced and just want to keep learning from other female speakers that are doing what you're doing. This just gives the panel and myself just a first read on the room so we can tailor our advice and not miss the others. So Bri's going to be checking that and maybe giving us a count of this kind of really a number system. You work all that out, Bri, okay?
Sure.
No pressure. All right, it's beautiful. Okay, so we've got about 21. We're expecting quite a few today, but because we're only here for an hour, I'm going to crack into it, okay? So, as I said, I'm your host and moderator today. I'm Marnie LeFevre, and the way we are running today's panel session is first I'm going to introduce you to our incredible panel of experienced female speakers here today, and then I'll be asking them questions to kick off the session and get the discussion going. Then please feel free to pop your questions in the chat, in the question part of the chat, because as chat rolls by, we might miss your questions unless you've popped them into the question part of the chat, and we will try to get as many towards the middle to end of the session as we can, okay? So again, welcome to the Women Futures Conference 2022. We're excited to be the first session for you this year, and let's get started. So first of all, I want to introduce you to Suzy Jackson. Give us a wave, Suzy. So for all of the, I'm not seeing you, but thanks, Suzy. I don't know if I'm delayed. So she's a corporate managing director at one of the largest professional service firms in the world and the owner of SKJ Coaching, a firm focused on training and coaching effective communication and career navigation. Now, Suzy has spent over a decade using what she's learned in a previous life as a professional musician to help clients across 5 continents rethink complex problems and communicate effectively. And her particular niche is focused on self-discovery and using storytelling to communicate with impact. So when Suzy's not working, she loves to travel as much as possible, scuba dive, and drink great wine. And really, who doesn't love doing that, Suzy? So our next speaker, Emma Washington, is a leadership consultant and licensed attorney. Now, she's also a 2-time TEDx speaker, best-selling Amazon author, and indie recording artist. And if you haven't given us a wave yet, Emma, please do. She's the founder of Motivator, a personal and professional development firm which provides leadership and communication coaching and consulting to individuals, teams, and organisations worldwide. She's an unapologetic optimist, and her favourite things include blue sky days, extra fine tip pens of any colour, and anything she can write on napkins included. She's a mum. She's also a mum of 2 miracle sons. So welcome, Em. I'm excited to be chatting with you. And then we go on to speaking strategist Bri Williams. She's worked with hundreds of expert speakers, including 6-figure coaches and consultants, non-fiction authors and executive speakers preparing for international media coverage, paid keynotes and breakout workshops, podcast tours, selling from stage and more. And after 16 years in corporate learning and development, including 6 years helping executives prepare for high-profile event speaking and media, Bri founded How to Present, offering public speaking and coaching and consultation. So in 2020, she also opened the doors to a professional speaker academy of entrepreneurs to market their business using speaking, with students going on to media appearances, paid speaking opportunities, as well as regular guest appearances on podcasts, summits and events to market their services and programs. As I mentioned before, she's Australian born, and after a decade of living in London, Bri's now based in the south of France, if you can't pick the accent. A little about me. I started my working career working for Richard Branson, so I got very, very good at understanding personal brand. I then went on to work for several large corporate companies, and I stopped and had two children. And I decided to become a stay-at-home mum. And that didn't really work out so well for me. It didn't make me happy, and it certainly didn't give me joy. I wasn't following my truth. So I went on to build a marketing agency in my closet, which I took national and then international. I then went on to build several businesses globally. I then wrote a best-selling book and became a keynote speaker, and I've spoken now on several stages, both and also globally, mostly in women's leadership. I now have founded a company called Fempire, and we teach women how to lead and become certified business coaches so that they can go on and help to promote and change other women's lives. So a little bit personally is I have 2 adult children now and a cavoodle that is way more work than my children ever were. So anyone that has a cavoodle would know what I'm talking about. And if you'd like to get to know any of us further, just visit our speaker bios, and please feel free to reach out, get in touch, head over to our companies, join our newsletters. We'd love to hear more from you and about you moving forward. All right. Let's move on to questions for our speakers. And the first one I'm actually going to ask you, Suzy.
Sure.
So I'd love for you to tell me why. So as part of a speaker platform, we know as speakers that story is key to engaging an audience, having them understand more about you and everything that you bring to the table. So why is storytelling so important and to how we communicate?
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Marnie, and thanks for dialing in today. So I spend a lot of time thinking about stories and how they impact communication. And this started from being taught by Andy Craig. And Andy Craig wrote a great book called Weekend Language, which I cannot recommend enough. It is a fantastic book about using plain language in difficult business situations. And I then took a path where I decided that I was going to research this more heavily and become much more deep in storytelling. And the reason it fascinates me is because in our social lives, about 65% of conversations we have socially are stories. If you think about it, you go to the pub, you sit down and you say, oh, you'll never guess what happened to me at work today. Or you go home to your partner and you say, oh, the best thing happened. I have to tell you about it. It's how we communicate as humans. It's how we make connections. And that was what really, really drove me to think about storytelling in a business perspective when I'm on stage or when I've got a particularly difficult board meeting coming up. So I started thinking about how this can all tie in together and why it's so impactful. And I think the reasons, particularly now, it's so important are a massive drop in attention span. Social media probably is to blame here. In America, certainly, there's an advert every couple of minutes when you're watching the football. You're never, ever looking at the same thing for very long. So we've all collectively suffered from a drop in attention span. And secondly, massive information overload. Just huge amounts of information coming at us at any time. And our ability to communicate clearly and memorably is going to be ever more important. So I think about it whenever I go on stage, what stories am I going to tell to bring things to life? And whenever I'm having a one-on-one conversation, I don't need to be in an auditorium in front of 1,000 people to think about it. It can be one-on-one as well. And thinking about how I'm really going to make that conversation, that coaching, that feedback, whatever the situation is, impactful. So that's why I think about it being so important. And it's really interesting that in industry now, there's a massive skill gap. LinkedIn came out last year and said communication was the #1 skill gap in today's workforce. So it's a really interesting area, I think, very much shown the amount of people that registered for this session. It's not just about how you show up at a TEDx talk, it's how you show up on a daily basis in an impactful way.
And so you kind of described it, but what do you believe makes story so impactful? I mean, why do we remember it more than all of the information that's thrown at us? Why is it, you know, what are the studies behind why story is so important?
Yeah, great. So science. So it's laughable that a musician is going to try and give a science lesson here, but I'll do my best. So it always rooted in science. If you think about it, when we evolved as humans, we didn't even have pen or paper. We didn't have stone and etching for a very, very long time. All we had was our ability to communicate with each other verbally. So if you were being chased by a lion as a cave woman or man and you ran up a tree and the lion didn't get you, you came back that night and said, do you know what? I found a great way to survive a lion. I ran up a tree. You guys should try it. That is how we learned to survive and thrive as human beings throughout the ages. And that's what is rooted in science. And when we tell stories, two different parts of our brains light up, and the person listening to us, their brains light up in the same places. And that's called neurocoupling. And neural coupling is what makes things really, really memorable, because they release two main hormones. They release others, but the two main hormones are dopamine. Dopamine makes you want to figure out what is coming next, figure out the punchline, and oxytocin. That oxytocin is willingness to commit, to empathy, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So by telling stories, you're on a scientific, neurological level, making people want to engage with you more. And I think that's absolutely fascinating, but it is truly, truly fundamentally evolutionary, and it's how we learn and grow. And that's the root of memorability. In fact, stories are 22 times more memorable than data. So if you ever have a ton of data that you need to share with an audience, if you make it into a story, they're much, much more likely to be able to go home that night and repeat it to their spouse or their friend.
Yeah, well, we teach, or I teach, speaking from stage and speaking and selling from stage. And I had a client who once shared with me, she was like, Marnie, I've stopped selling. Like, I do my monthly speaker events, but I've stopped selling. And I said, well, tell me, are you still telling your story? And she said, well, no, people have heard it before. And I was like, well, how about you just test it and start telling the story again, like we taught you to do, and see what happens. And she started to add in her story again, because there were always new people in the room. And as a result, she started selling again. So story really is important, isn't it, to build that trust and connection. And Em, I want to invite you in here now too, because you're a TEDx 2-time speaker. How important is story in that, in TEDx talks and in your TEDx talks?
Absolutely. First, everyone can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, great. Good to be here. Yeah, I love everything that Suzy said, and I agree. And storytelling is a huge part of TEDx Talks, although, especially for anyone that is interested in becoming a TEDx speaker, you don't lead with your story when you're applying to speak. However, when you are speaking, in order to connect and engage with the audience, storytelling is huge. So for whether it was my TEDx talks or clients that I'm working with who are given or have given their TEDx talks, we try to find that story that connects the message with the audience, that story that just adds that missing piece to the message that you're trying to share. So in a nutshell, to answer your question, storytelling is huge, even in TEDx talks, which are about ideas that are worth spreading.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you even think about
well, I was just going to add one more thing to what Suzy was saying. I tell the story that the Houston Astros, I live in Houston, Texas, and the Houston Astros just won the World Series. I could care less about baseball, football, basketball. However, I say that, and I live in a home with three guys, my husband and two sons. However, as soon as I hear the story behind a particular player, whether it's a story of overcoming the odds or a story of a coach who said, you're never going to make it, or whatever the story is, I'm glued in and rooting for that person and for that person's team. So storytelling, to Suzy's point, it does add that extra layer of connection with the audience.
Absolutely. Bri,
we also have a question. We do. We have a question from the audience, and the question is how to tell a story without losing your audience's interest. And of course, I'll put my 2 cents worth in. I think that the main thing when we're thinking about storytelling from the stage is that we want to very much put ourselves in the shoes of our audience and think about what it is that really oftentimes it's our ability to show information or a transformation, or perhaps help them think about what's possible in the world through what we've experienced or what our clients have experienced, and to show them what's beyond where they're perhaps sitting in their seat at that point in time. So that would be my really quick hot take on that one, but I'm sure we've got some other thoughts here as well.
Suzy?
Yeah, I can weigh in, sure. I think another huge help is structure, because there's a great book by John Medina called Brain Rules. If anyone hasn't read it, I very much recommend it. And he always says that hierarchy in a story is like giving a thirsty man a glass of water. Our brains crave hierarchy and structure. And so if you're going to go on stage and you want to grab people's attention, you start with a hook, you start with telling people what you're going to tell them, and then you give them a really clear roadmap for what you're going to hear today. I'm going to talk about 3 things today, and then when you finish number 1, and now let's move on to number 2. So even if they've wandered off for a couple of seconds to think about something else or check a text message, remember, we're in number 2. There are 3 things I need to take away today. And I think structure is a really, really helpful way of anchoring people back into the message.
I'd like to also add to I'd like to add to the brilliance that's already been shared. When telling a story, oftentimes people want to start at the beginning, in the beginning was, or once upon a time, or I was born in, and there's a beautiful way of storytelling called episodic storytelling, where you just take the audience to a particular scene, a particular moment. And you just narrow in on, what you were seeing in that moment, what you smelled or tasted or heard, just bring them into that room with you. And then go from there. Kind of like if you're watching any, I used to watch a lot of James Bond movies growing up. And a lot of times the movie would start in a marketplace in a foreign country with somebody chasing, somebody chasing him or somebody else. And it just took you there and then maybe took you back 7 years and then brought you to the present moment. So how you start the story is important. You don't have to start at the very beginning, but you use enough, you share enough in the story to bring that person, to bring that audience member into that moment with you. And then you go from there.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to add to that too, is I think what I see so I think what I see a lot of people doing is they forget that you're sharing your story for the audience, not for yourself. So you need to remember that when you're telling the story, it's for them, not you. We all get caught up as business owners and speakers in our own stuff. And nobody is really there for us. They just care about them and their problems. And you're the solution right now. So the way you tell your story has to always, will first come from the heart. And secondly, you have to remember that it's about them and not you. And then you will find that it really flows and you'll probably keep them engaged. If you have, as Suzy said, the structure and the connection, and all the girls have put in such incredible information, you might tell it from the middle and help them to stay focused and then come back to the start. But the point is you're telling it for them, okay? All right, well, we've covered a bit of story, and is there no more, Bri, shout out if there's any more questions on that, or anybody put some more questions in that. But I want to move now because we do have speakers here. Sorry? No?
I was just saying there is another question in the chat. Okay. I don't know if you wanted to address that or move on to something else.
What is it?
Okay, it's a question that came prior to the start. It's by Dana. And Dana asks, what is the best way to find speaking gigs ahead of time? I seem to always find the best fit events too late. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, well, let's just move straight on to that then. Em, do you want to address it?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that that has happened to me as well. Sometimes I've found in the past speaking events too late. However, I think of it as being early for the next time that if it's a conference that the event will hold. And so I'll use that. I'll take note of the time of year that the event is holding, and I'll stay in touch with the organizer or the event team, and keep just so that I can stay up to date with when they're accepting pitches for their event. The other thing is knowing that events normally staff, or not staff is not the right word, but they normally fill their speaker positions way ahead of time, sometimes even a year, maybe more ahead of time. I'll just stay on their radar and keep them on my radar. Those are the two things that come to mind right now. And so I'll toss it back over to you, Marnie.
Beautiful. Bri, you must have some advice on this.
Yes, I'm always talking about this because we should, ABC, always be connecting. We want to make sure that when we see that event that we've missed perhaps this year's opportunity, we're looking at who's the event host, who's the producer, who are the people associated with that event, and making contact. I love the look of your event. It seems like you've got your lineup set for this year. Do you have anything else coming up in the future, in the near future? Because that's, my ideal opportunity. So always be connecting, but also to have a system in terms of outreach and research. So firstly, set up your Google alerts for call for speakers be a guest. It depends what type of speaking opportunity that you're looking for. But if you do like the sound of these big events with the big stages, they do plan, as said, well in advance. So you want to make sure that you are always looking. I do it on a Monday, maybe because I'm a nerd, maybe because it's one of my favorite things to do, but I sit there and I go through all the call for speakers that have come into my inbox. I have a look on LinkedIn as well, because that's where my ideal gigs happen, where my hosts and event producers live on social media, and I make contact that way. And so either, you know, it's really unsexy in a lot of ways, the speaking industry, because there's a lot of forms to fill out. There's a lot of repetition. You know, if you are getting in email inquiries, which after a while, if you build up your brand as a speaker, you will start getting people saying, oh, I've got something coming up. Are you interested? Which is wonderful, right? It's one less pitch you have to do. But as you're building up to that, be doing those searches on a regular basis. And then I don't go ahead and apply for things straight away. I file everything. So as soon as I see an opportunity, I check what the date is when I need to have applied by. I file it into a system that I have. It could be an Excel spreadsheet for you. For me, I use Trello. And I make sure I set a reminder so that I go back and I sit down and do all of my outreach in one go, because easier. Efficiency is really important, because some of these things do take time. You're always going to have your title, your overview, your speaker bio. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that's repetitive, but you want to be tailoring your responses to that event, to the specific theme, to the audience, because don't forget, you're pitching the host and you're pitching the audience, because they're going to use whatever you submit to them to entice people to their event. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how to best help my host do that and hopefully get selected in the process.
Do you have anything to add to that, Suzy? I'll also give a piece of advice after this, but if you have something, throw it at us.
I am just going to reiterate, have a system. Mine is an Excel sheet, and just make sure that you are documenting everything, whether they come annually, biannually, what have you, quarterly, and make sure that you're filling that in, because your future self will thank you for how diligent you are today with filling it in.
Okay, I'm going to give you a structured system. Okay, so there's a triangle. So when you're approaching event organizers, generally events are sitting in investment, professional, personal advice, and professional advice. Okay, professional would be you're a business speaker and you're going to speak on all your social media. Your personal is health, wellness, if you're a life coach or some transformation in your personal area. And then there's the investment, the Bitcoin real estate investment, you know, the jam. We can go in deeper. When you first start looking for events, so don't waste your time pitching. Make sure you research, either work out which place you are in that triangle, and then I want you to go into Meetup or Eventbrite, and I want you to put in investment. Let's say you're in the investor section, put in investor meetups. Okay, and then you'll scroll down and you can go in dates ahead of time. And this is really great for our new speakers too, because a lot of these meetups are smaller groups and they're always looking for someone to speak and inspire. So you head in there, and if we were pulling this up now, there'd at least be probably 10 opportunities just where I live. And then you just systematically work out what that event is about. You approach that. Now, it may not be for that meetup group, but they're always looking to book ahead of them. There's a structure to how you approach them. Tell them what your domain is, what your subdomain is, and then the 3 things that you can speak about, and give them some stuff to work with, and then do some testimonials. Maybe send your speaker bio if you have one, and again, there's a structure to that. But that's a really great place, even for seasoned speakers, not the big stages and everything, because you need to have a lot of experience before they'll invite you onto a big stage, because it's a big risk for an event planner to bring an inexperienced speaker in. So get your experience through Meetup and Eventbrite. And people in those groups are always. In fact, I can say, reach out to a lady called Lisa Brandis, Intuitive Reiki. If you are in the health, wellness, and spiritual space, she's always looking for speakers. So boom, there's she'll kill me tomorrow when she gets 400 people sort of saying, can I come and speak? She'll be like, how did that happen? I'll be like, I don't know. That's a miracle. But yeah, the event organisers are always the second thing is, and this is what I came to, organise your own events. So organise your own events. That's taking your power back. I got sick of being invited, waiting to be invited for keynotes because I'm really passionate about advancing women in business. And I thought, well, bugger it. And back then there was no great opportunities for women to speak, right? So I was like, well, bugger it. I'm going to do my own rooms. So I worked out Facebook, or to be honest, I employed someone else too. I worked out Facebook. It's running. We started doing events. The events grew from 50 to 100 to 200, 300, 500, and we just built from there. Gave great content array, gave great inspiration, had a go, took a risk. It's not for everyone, but I tell you, it takes away the and then I also sold into events, so it paid to be able to run these, or you just sell a ticket to the event. So there is, again, a way to do it, but I highly recommend for definitely our more experienced speakers, please start running your own rooms and reach out to me if you're not sure how to do that, or any of these ladies, because I imagine they, would have some advice for you. And, bugger waiting around for that invite. I hope I'm allowed to say bugger 3 times, 4 times. Make your own room. All right. That's my advice. All right. So passionate about getting women's voices out. So passionate. So reach out if you need any direction in that, okay? So does anyone have anything else? Was that helpful? Can you just let us know in the chat, ladies, if that's helpful, if it's given you a little bit of our startups, a little bit of advice and motivation? Our more experienced speakers, hopefully you'll get encouraged to run your own rooms, maybe invite other speakers to your thing. Then yeah, I highly encourage it. Okay, beautiful. Now I want to sort of move the talk to a lot of women struggle to find their voice, and all of us are very passionate, obviously, about getting all of you up there and out there speaking, and you've obviously attended today because you've got some interest. But Bri, I want to direct this question at you. What do you think is the easiest way to find your voice as speakers if you're just starting out?
It depends what you want to share from the stage. There are different types of speakers. For those of you that have an interest in educational content, it's so important to have a level of comfort around sharing different stories. And I think to break it down and just make it simple, you don't have to share your life story. I often get questions about, how personal should it be? How much do I need to share? And the fact is, it needs to be in context for what you're talking about. So thinking about the stories that really do show your audience, rather than just telling them the facts and figures alone, like Suzy mentioned before. I love that you have that 22 times stat, because I use that myself in my sessions. But the fact is, we all have a voice, and we often don't use it. I worked in corporate for 16 years at least. And I found that the people that got promoted, got listened to in meetings, tended to use their voice more, and they weren't necessarily the smartest or the hardest working people in the room. They were the folks that had the confidence to speak up. So whether you're sitting here as someone in a business, whether it's your own or someone else's, the fact is you can be the most brilliant person in the room. You can have the ability to help other people, but if you don't speak up, we'll never know. So that's my little call to action there, that we really do all have something that can help other people, whether it help make, fill in missing pieces for other folks, present a compelling project plan. It doesn't have to be a TED style talk, does it? And I know, coming from a corporate background, that I had some blocks around sharing stories. Felt like I maybe wasn't being super professional if I shared like a little glimmer of my personality, and I struggled with that for quite some time. And I also had a story that affected my entire world, professional and personal, when my husband got very sick about 7 years ago with cancer. And I was unable to share that story with people that were really close to me. I was unable to share that story out loud without, fear of judgment or breaking down and all of these things. And also that feeling of, is anyone really that interested in me anyway? Why am I speaking about stuff like this? But the fact is that we all connect much more deeply with speakers that we feel as though we're like, or we understand them on some level, or we can see how they're creating these kind of mental or emotional shifts for us from the stage. So I encourage you to think about what's in context for the big idea that you want to share, or the message, the key idea that you want to share in your presentation or your meeting or your talk, and use that as a kind of guiding point to get started with sharing stories and sharing more of who you are and your brilliance, really. Don't hide that.
Em, do you have anything to add to that? So the easiest way to find your voice.
Yeah, all good what Bri has shared. I think also I'd add that oftentimes put future speakers or emerging speakers find themselves trying to sound like somebody else, someone they admire, a speaker that is doing great things in the world, and somehow they think that I have to sound like Tony Robbins, or I have to sound like, name your favorite speaker. And I think, to Bri's point, finding your voice also includes finding and owning your voice, how you speak, how you don't have to sound like anyone else. It's really not about sounding like anyone else, but more about sharing the message that you, and I'll use the word, are called to serve. I really believe that I believe I'm called to serve in the area, in the realm of speaking, and I believe that sharing messages is a calling for all of us in some way, shape, or form. So I think that owning how you speak, whether it's with an accent, or not. I have people that feel like, I'll start speaking once, I get rid of this accent. We all have accents, and you're listening to 4 of us on this panel, and we all 4 talk very differently from each other. So I think owning your voice comes with, once you find your voice, once you realize and recognize that you don't have to sound like anyone else, that your voice is good as is. It might need some refining in terms of the message and how you deliver that message, but the way that you speak is fine, and let's work with that. So finding your voice and then owning it so that you can show up authentically and connect with the audience.
Well, I think adding to that too is, if you want to become a powerful speaker and really become a powerful paid speaker, you really need to lean into personal brand. And as part of the personal brand journey, you need to find out your authentic self, and you need to be prepared to be vulnerable. Wouldn't you agree? I know all of you would agree. So creating a powerful personal brand means deep diving into who you are, how you show up, how you want to be seen in the world, and it isn't anybody else. Be authentic to you, because your audience will know every single time, because it's an energy thing. It's an energy thing, and you are absolutely right, Em. You are called to speak, because speaking's not easy. It's one of the highest paid professions in the world, but it's also one of the hardest, and most people would prefer to be in the coffin than give the eulogy, right? So you need to keep in mind that it's too hard to be somebody else on stage, because everybody's going to see straight through you. And the more that you're vulnerable and authentic, the more your audience will connect, the better you'll do, the more you'll inspire, the bigger difference you'll make. And people don't mind seeing you fail because they kind of relate. If you stuff up, if you're really nervous, you just call it out. Oh my God, I'm so nervous today. I'm so sorry. Don't worry. In 2 minutes, my heart rate's going to drop and my voice will stop shaking. And I'm going to share 3 really great things with you, like Suzy just said. But until that happens, just bear with me. And everyone just goes, oh, the audience just sighs and says, okay. Because they all actually want you to succeed. It's not a comedy club where they're heckling. They're there to see you speak and inspire them. They want to take away something great from you. So the more that you're authentically you and share from the heart with the audience in mind, the better you'll do as a speaker every single time. And I've tried it before, and it's too hard to be someone else on stage. And I'm sure maybe all of you, Suzy, Bri, everyone, we've tried. I remember when I first started speaking, I go, all right, yes or yes. And Tony Robbins says that too when you're trying to get a response from yes or yes. What do you think, ladies? Yes or yes? And another speaker came up to me and said, oh, no, don't do that. So we give each other tips too when we're all speaking in a room together. So yeah, be authentically you and just try to tap into the amazing person that you are, because we want to see that. We don't want to see anyone else. Right. So how do you come up with the right message to share, Suzy? Or Em, how do you come up with the right message to share? I'll throw that to you first, Suzy.
Sure. I think it's about what we spoke about earlier, working backwards from the audience interests. So this comes back to tailoring. And, most of us have a keynote or a presentation that we do, and 2 or 3 areas that we speak very consistently on. That's fine. But we also need to then think about, what are the audience wanting to get out of this? Is it enlightenment? Is it inspiration? Is it a learning, more like a training, more technical? The list goes on. And I think trying to think about working backwards from that is where I always start, putting myself in their shoes. Have they been to many of these before? Is it a topic that they recognize or would know? Is it something that's just additive to their day-to-day or entirely net new? So I tend to run through a little bit of a mental list of questions like that before I get started, and then go from there and tailor the messages and the stories accordingly, even if the topic is the same across multiple events.
Em, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. This comes up a lot, especially with aspiring TEDx speakers. So you used a phrase a few minutes ago, Marnie, about deep diving. And I think with clients and even with myself, it is a deep dive into who you are before we even go to the message. Who are you? How do you want to show up? And then there's a list of questions that I will have you answer in terms of what message to get out. Questions such as, first of all, what do you want to be known for? Let's start there. And then let's look at your experience and your expertise, maybe your education, either one or all 3 of those, to see how that combines with the message and how you want to show up, what you want to be known for. What are the things that light you up? What are the things that burn you up? That just really upset you and you want to do something about it, and maybe speaking and sharing a message is the way to get that out. What are some misconceptions that you wish stood? What topics have you spoken about or written about in the past that, really enjoyed speaking about? And then this is the question that I'll ask and hone in on that message right at the end. It's okay, if you could only share one message, I know you've got a lot that you want to share, but if today was, I don't mean to sound morbid, but if today was like the last day on earth and you had only one opportunity to share a message, what would that message be? What would it be? And almost every time after thought, deep thought, and after going through the other list of questions, we're able to come up with that message, that one that resonates. And I tell TEDx clients, you can give more than one TEDx talk, or you can give more than one talk, period, right? This is not the end of your speaking journey, your journey as a speaker. But for this stage, for this moment, what is it, that one message that you want to share? And then afterwards we can move on to the others. So those are some of the things that I encourage aspiring TEDx speakers or aspiring speakers to ask themselves.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. I sort of want to now move to the left because we have some experienced speakers here. So Bri, I want to shoot this question at you. So for the women that have been speaking for a while, but feel they could be more effective, what can they do before or while they speak to create a greater impact or greater engagement?
So there are a couple of things that I think immediately stand out. And the first one is a big red pen. Oftentimes we don't get to the point. We try and be clever instead of clear. So an editing process, if you do have a talk that you're already using, is a really useful process to try and get some fresh eyes on how you can say what you need to say more clearly. Oftentimes we faff about, don't know if that's a technical term, but we take our time to get to the point. And as Suzy said at the top of all of this, our attention spans are shrinking. And as Marnie said, our audience wants to know what's in it for me. So it's really our job as the speaker from the get-go to let our audience know that they're in the right room and why they should pay attention. And hint, it's because it actually benefits them. It's got nothing to do with you as a speaker. Although we're not going to leave any of our credibility clues out, are we? So if we work for Richard Branson, we're not going to leave that out of our intro, are we? We're going to make sure that if we help people on TEDx stages, we say that so that people feel safe, they feel as though you're a credible source, but of course we're making it all about them.
Yeah, exactly. And girls, pop your questions in now if you have them, and we'll refer to them in a little while. Suzy, do you have anything to add to that?
I was typing to our lovely question in the chat. So no, I do not. I think that was well summarized. Thanks, Bri.
Okay, Em, how about you?
So the question was, what advice for our more experienced speakers?
Yeah, what can they do to put some wind back in their sails or make it more interesting or different?
Yeah, so I think in addition to everything that Bri said, I'm even though I'm a speaker and even though I coach other speakers, I also continue to have coaches myself, right? I feel like I'm always learning. And there's a saying that a dear friend often says, you can't read the label from inside the jar, right? So I can't see what I can't see. And so, and I always want to grow. I always want to evolve. And so to the point that Bri made, having a fresh set of eyes, I'm doing that constantly and trying to make sure that who I have listened as I'm practicing, as I'm building, as I'm growing, are not yes people, not the ones that will always agree or think that, you know, I'm the best thing since sliced bread or the best speaker since sliced bread, but those who will give me critical feedback and allow me to, you know, and maybe let me know how things land, maybe a different thing that I'm adding to the talk or a different story or a joke. Nah, that's not funny, Em. You know, just always having other coaches and other people that hold. I think I'm always going to have a coach. I decided years ago that until I die, I will always have at least one coach and usually more than one coach, whether that's for speaking or anything else. All right, those are my 2 cents.
Beautiful. So there's a lot of women, obviously all women here today, and unfortunately we're judged very differently when we get up to speak. Women only get 2% of investor funds. We know 2 to 3%. And it's because we're treated differently at the front of the room. So do any of you have any advice on, or just tips, or maybe just things you've identified that are taken differently from a woman on stage, which women need to be aware of when they finally have the courage to stand up and speak? They need to know really, how they're going to be perceived, and maybe how to manage some of the obstacles that they might face as women. Bri, can I throw that to you? Would you like to start with that one?
Absolutely. The number one thing that I worked on as a newer speaker from Australia, but also this affects other folks culturally, is the uptick at the end of your sentence that makes your statement sound like a question. Now, of course, this robs you of authority when you're trying to deliver a message with impact. So we want to make statements sound like statements, and questions, of course, are allowed to sound like questions. But the uptick is one that affects women in business particularly. And the other one that I want to say is hold your ground. So if you are in a conversation where someone is trying to speak over you and you have the floor, hold your ground. So make sure you finish your sentence at the very least. And if someone's being rude to you, you can ask them to hold up and let you finish while you make your point. So hold your ground, and make sure that within that you are still, if we are in a virtual environment, allowing time for pauses, especially important in a virtual communication situation, to allow your audience to have the opportunity to be a part of the conversation. We need to plan for this delay, but also to give emphasis to what you're sharing as well.
Em, do you have any tips for female speakers?
Yes, I was just thinking about everything that Bri was saying and how I would respond to, I'm going to sound like a broken record. So I'm just going to echo everything that Bri said and add that we're generally speaking, our voice has been conditioned over the years from the time we were young girls all the way up to adulthood. And, I don't want to get go too far to the left with this, but our voices have been conditioned. We've been, told girls are supposed to sound a certain way or say or speak certain, in a certain way with a certain tone. Culturally, I'm going to just put this out there. I've dealt with having to temper my tone and temper my voice so that I don't come across as being angry or forceful or, whatever, or a type A personality, which I'm not a type A personality, but I've just had to find a way to temper the way that I speak so that it's received well. And I think having had to find that balance between holding my ground, as Bri said, but also not coming across as too aggressive has been it has been a balancing act, and I'm still a work in progress with that. I'll be honest and say that's still something that excuse me, that I deal with. I don't want to lose the audience or the listener or the one-on-one conversation person. I don't want to lose that person just because of the way that I'm coming across. So I'm still navigating how to do that. That's my response right now as I think it through.
Yeah, beautiful. As I would add that women, how many people through a show of, I don't know, stick a number one in the chat, but how many women have been told that they're too? We're constantly told that we're too much. We need to,
Yes.
we need to be smaller, be more contained. Even speaker coaches in the way past that I worked with was like, you know, be very contained. You don't want to be seen as being too much, blah, blah, blah. So get out there and just aim to be too much. Stand in your power. Be vulnerable, be too much, don't apologize for it. You don't have to be aggressive about it. You just have to stand your ground. And women on this particular talk is behind you saying, go be too much more, because the more that we're too, the more we break down walls and biases and gender conditioning, and we just become ourselves. If you're a very quiet, confident speaker, brilliant. You're probably still going to get that was too much. But if you're a gregarious, I don't think that first word exists, sort of out there speaker, own your truth and speak from there, because the people that need to find you will really resonate with that message as well. So if you're getting that you're too much, I just want to say, ladies, more power to you. Keep being too much. We need more women in the world that are too much. That brings us to the end of the session. Be too much. Yes, exactly. That brings us to the end of the session. That raced by. I hope you got some great tips. We started with tell a story. Make sure you tell a story. It's memorable. I bet you'll remember Bri's cancer story, or the story of or Em's athletes. You know, she doesn't pay attention to the sport, but she does pay attention to the athlete story, and I'm exactly the same. And then just the beautiful stats and structure that Suzy shared around story and presenting is really, really important when delivering a powerful message. We then went on to sharing tips to get booked, what you might need, you know, to structure your speaking gig. But we're going to all give you a free gift right now. My gift, Fempire has an academy, and you can't get in that academy unless you're working with one of our coaches. But today, for the next 24 hours, you can sneak in the back door. I'm going to put a link in chat. It's $333 for the academy for the whole year. There's a course on personal branding. Personal brand course. As you build your personal brand, you will find a section on how to create your story. So jump in there, spend the $333, take yourself through that course, and that is my gift to you today. Bri, what do you have for our beautiful?
So I have a resource
attendees
to help you find your next speaking gig. Of course, if you are looking for paid speaking or visibility opportunities to market your expert business, this will help you step through that exact process and find your next speaking gig. So I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. And of course, let's connect on LinkedIn, because you want to always be connecting.
Beautiful. Suzy.
Yeah, so I have a PDF of 5 tips and tricks for being on stage. And I'm glad someone put breathing in there, because that is one of them. So that will be attached to this session. And please do find me on LinkedIn if you wanted to discuss further.
And Em.
And yes, and I have a free guide for aspiring TEDx speakers. It's a guide called I Want to Be a TEDx Speaker. And so if you want that, I'll put the link in the chat as well. And also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to be a part of your world.
All right, connect with all of us on LinkedIn. You can find us on the in the speaker bios here. Ladies, put your websites in too for anyone that would like to jump over and see what you're all about. And connect. If there's anything that we can do to help you get out there speaking, please let us know, and we will do our very best to support you, because of course together we rise. So that's a wrap for today, ladies, and it's been an absolute pleasure helping you. Thank you so much, Bri, Em, and Suzy, for taking the time today, and we can't wait to see where you go with all your speaking engagements, so that you forge a path for other women out there. Bye for now, ladies.